Was it a bear? Was it a gorilla? Or possibly a prankster? Or maybe it was something else. With such a vast and varying planet, it brings with it different climates and environments, and in them, all forms of life. Big, small, cute, and even scary. Today we're going to talk about Bigfoot, one of the most heavily debated species. With Bigfoot castings still being produced today, it leaves us to wonder where it all began. There are numerous stories and sightings of Bigfoot. Some are very convincing while others are very questionable. In the world of Bigfoot, you have non-believers, believers, and then you have hardcore believers. One of the most iconic Bigfoot stories dates back all the way back to 1924. There was a Swedish-Canadian logger named Albert Ostman who claimed to have been kidnapped in his sleeping bag one night while on a prospecting mission on the head of Toba Inlet. This was a very intense story, as Ostman would go on to say that after being dragged in his sleeping bag for most of the night, he would eventually be dropped in a clearing of a small valley. As the sun would rise, it revealed a family of Bigfoot. Imagine how you'd react to such a happening. Ostman claimed there was a father, mother, son, and even a daughter. He was apparently held prisoner for almost a week before he escaped by feeding the old man, as he called the father Bigfoot, some chewing tobacco that was in his sleeping bag. Ostman wouldn't come forward with the story until 1957. Ostman's story wouldn't become public until he told the incident to John Green, a journalist who published a serious article titled, "I Was Kidnapped by a Sasquatch." As Ostman's story would make headlines, it would stir up another incident that happened in 1924. On July 13, 1924, an Oregon publisher called The Oregonian reported an article about a group of 5 miners working in the southeastern slopes of Mount St. Helens in Washington state. They reportedly got attacked in their cabin by a group of what they referred to as mountain devils. As time passed, the story became known as the Ape Canyon incident. Gorilla-like creatures had been seen at the gorge for as long as anyone could remember. In the 1960s, there was a team of Sasquatch investigators that came across the old Oregonian article. They would proceed to find and interview the last living member from the incident. The old prospector's name was Fred Beck. He would go on to tell the interviewers what events had place that terrifying night. Beck would have revealed that the attack on the cabin started as a reaction to the prospectors firing on creatures that had been shadowing them for days. The attack was said to have taken place at the dead of night in waves until daybreak. The group of ape-like creatures stormed outside of the cabin. The ape-like creatures started banging on doors and walls, stomping on the roof, throwing rocks and reaching into gaps in the cabin. The miners were barely able to hold them off by firing their rifles at the shadowy figures. The attacks persisted until daylight. The district's forest ranger, who claimed to have met the miners on their way out, said he'd never seen grown men more frightened. With an event such as that, it's sure to be a traumatic experience. With that much going on, it leaves the question of possible memory distortion. Maybe it was a bear or some kind of other animal, but if all 5 men agree on one belief, it is hard to justify that. In 1958, there was a journalist named Andrew Ginzoli. He was a part of the Humboldt Times. One day, Ginzoli received a letter from a reader who told him that there were a group of loggers in Northern California that had reportedly seen mysteriously large footprints. Imagine coming across such a footprint for the first time. After receiving the letter, Ginzoli jokingly wrote, "Maybe we have a relative of the abominable snowman of the Himalayas." Ginzoli initially thought little of it, as he stated that the story made a good Sunday morning read. To his surprise, it sparked fascination in readers. Ginzoli went on to team up with another Humboldt Times journalist named Betty Allen. The pair would publish additional articles and writings about the name the creature who made the footprints had received. The name was Bigfoot, and it pushed the name into the public eye. Probably the most iconic Bigfoot sighting dates back to 1967 in Northern California, when a filmmaker by the name of Patterson-Gimlin shot a short film of an unidentified subject. This film has been the universal symbol for Bigfoot since. The giant walking creature eventually would be called Patty. Many believe it was a hoax and said it was just a guy in a suit. If that was the case, then there would be a problem, as the film's subject walking speed and height exceeded that of the average human, as the height to stature ratio is beyond human proportions, and the proportions match much greater to that of an adult male gorilla. Jeff Meldrum, a professor of anatomy and anthropology, would point no further than to the Planet of the Apes franchise. The first film in the franchise would come out around the same time as the Patterson-Gimlin film. He would point out that the Planet of the Apes film won an Oscar for makeup and was on the edge of film technology, and was nothing impressive to him. Meldrum would actually have his anatomy students point out the different landmarks in the surface anatomy of Patty. They start at the head and they can see the trapezius. They can see the deltoids, erector spine, down to the back. Shoulder blades moving under the skin. The quads contract when they're supposed to contract. None of which ever showed up in a cheap off-the-shelf costume, Meldrum said. But many have come forward either saying they sold the suit or were a part of the whole hoax. Hopefully as time progresses there will be more answers. But seeing as this was decades ago, we may never truly know. Maybe you believe the stories. Maybe you don't. Maybe you've even seen it. If that's the case, let me know down below. We live in such an enormous world and could never be certain what could be out there. Maybe it's just a prankster. Maybe it's a bear or a gorilla, or maybe just maybe Bigfoot is out there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the subject down below. Until next time, it's Content Jungle, signing out.